We're a multilateral development bank, so we're owned by governments, 70 of them now. Primarily the European Union and the member states of the European Union. So although we're not an institution of the EU, we are majority owned by the EU. We are also owned by all of the 38 countries where we operate. We're owned by all of the G7 countries, and since 2016, China has become a shareholder as well. And then more recently also India. You can see here the region where we operate. It's an interesting region because it's over 3 continents, but it's only really bits and pieces of those 3 continents. We began in Central Europe, and then we, in the mid to late 90s, were beginning to operate also in Southeast Europe, Eastern Europe, Central Asia, and then Mongolia, and then in more recent years also Turkey, and the countries of the region that we call the Southern and Eastern Mediterranean. You can see some countries there in North Africa and the Middle East. What's interesting about this region as well is that it very closely maps and correlates with the geography of the Silk Road economic belt. That wasn't by design, but it just happens to be the case. A key thing about the Ebrd is that we focus on private sector investment. So most multilateral development banks, the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank, are good examples. They work primarily with governments and they provide lending to governments. We provide more than 70% of our lending to private companies and private banks and private financing solutions like public-private partnerships. And that's very important because at the heart of the Ebrd is this very commercial banking culture and approach. We look at business, we look at the interests of business and the barriers to business, and the policies that are required for business to thrive. You can see there our top investee markets last year. That would have been a shock to the founders of the Ebrd to see Egypt and Turkey at the top of the list, and Greece. It's also very striking, I think, to see both Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan in top 10. We're investing pretty much in all major economic and industrial sectors in these 38 economies. And for us to invest in a project, it has to be in one of those countries. It has to meet our standards of compliance, and environment, social policy, and so forth. And it has to be commercially viable. That's of course crucial. As a bank, we have a very commercial outlook as a bank. And crucially, it also has to contribute to the understanding that we have built on over the years of the qualities of a modern market economies. And those qualities include competitiveness and the development of a level playing field for private sector, but they also include inclusiveness, that idea of diversity that Greg was referring to a moment ago. They have to be well-governed economies with institutions that are robust and offer good laws and regulations for the market. They have to be resilient to shocks, economic shocks and contagion. They have to be integrated within themselves and across borders, and crucially they also have to be green. And the green economy is a very important focus for the bank. And then of course there are some types of investment that we do finance. When we work with business and clients, our value proposition is built on the fact that we are able to support their investments by mitigating their risks, and that comes very much from the knowledge that we have of these countries. So they are all our shareholders. We have good connections with those authorities because we work with them on infrastructure investments, but also on the legal and regulatory environment for investments. Then we have also a wide range of financial instruments, including debt at various tenors and terms, which go beyond what the market is able to offer. We provide equity finance. We're able to take direct shares in project financing vehicles or companies establishing themselves in our region. We offer a wide range of environmental finance products, and crucially, we also offer local currency, which often the market is not able to offer in these, in many cases, smaller markets. And so because of that, we're seen as a very good partner for other financing institutions. I'm not going to discuss this slide in depth, but the main thing to take away is that for each of our projects and for each of our clients, we have a tailored approach. We don't have a cookie-cutter approach to the financial instruments that we offer. We look at every project, every client, every country, and every risk, and we tailor the finance that we're offering accordingly. So this is just a snapshot of the companies that we're working with. High-profile companies. We also work with local companies that most people outside the country don't work with not. So we provide both large-scale financing up to €500 million in some cases, and small-scale financing as low as €500 million in some cases. We have strategic priorities that evolve over time in line with the requirements of our shareholders. This is just four of the key ones that we have at the moment. Connectivity, sustainable infrastructure, that correlates of course very well with the Belt and Road Initiative. The green economy, the green energy transition is very important to the bank. We have a target that 40% of our investments should be in that area. Attracting FDI and supporting SME financing, and developing capital markets so that there can be local currency and local capital markets solutions to financing projects in these markets. China became a shareholder in 2016. It's a very small shareholder, 0.1%. But it is very significant because of that overlap with the Belt and Road Initiative in geography, but more crucially in terms of China's outbound investments profile. So Chinese debts, Chinese companies providing FDI are now globally probably the most important debt provider and FDI provider in most of the economies where we work. And then also there is, at some level, at high level, conceptual overlap and overlap in objectives between the EBRD mandates and some of the stated objectives of the Road Initiative. So these concepts of integration, of market-led development, and the green economy are very much at the forefront of declarations and initiatives that we're developing as well. And we believe we have a unique offer to Chinese companies and banks to mitigate risks and help them to work in countries that actually many of them do not know very well at all. So we've established quite a lot of partnerships and cooperation with a range of institutions. We have events, so we have an event last March in Beijing focused on Belarus, which is a research center of the State Council. We had a much larger event in November, programs with the legal flag of China, opened by the Deputy Governor, our President, the European Commissioner, President Ebrd, Chairman of ICBC, and over 700 delegates, including senior officials also from Central Asia and the world of business too. And so we looked at the opportunities in Central Asia, which are considerable. It's a fast-growing region, and also the risks and the need for high-quality investments. And there was good network connection. So concretely, the way we work with Chinese enterprises is in three areas. The first area is through the co-financing with Chinese banks, where we parallel funds or sell down in de-lending structures, sell down our debts to Chinese commercial banks, and also to commercial banks from around the world. But you can see we have a particularly strong connection with Bank of China and with ICBC across the board. Indirectly, we also work with Chinese contractors who bid for the projects that we finance, and in particular the public sector projects where we lend to states, and then according to our rules, we require that there is an open competitive tender for those contracts. And you can see that Chinese companies have bid quite a lot. typically they do about 35% of the bids that they make, and that compares fairly well with the bids of companies from other countries. And then thirdly, we're increasingly working with Chinese direct investors. So very briefly, I'll give you two examples. One is with a yeast manufacturer which established a plant in Egypt, and it wanted to expand that plant. It wanted to build a wastewater treatment plant, and it wanted to extend its supply chain linkages in Egypt. And because of our good business connections with small companies in Egypt, because of our environmental finance product, and also because of the way they felt we could help them manage the political risks in Egypt, and that we were able to lend them dollars locally, they were very keen to work with Ebrd, and so that was in fact our first transaction with a Chinese last year. And then we have also since financed two projects with a private solar plant developer and operator in Kazakhstan, and there we were able to offer a long-term Kazakh tenge financing, which is difficult otherwise to obtain, and also to secure co-financing from these concessional financing vehicles, the Green Climate Fund. Another thing to mention about this is that we have been instrumental in helping the government to set up the regulatory framework for renewable energy investments. So it was called the feed-in tariff regime and the auctions regime. And I'll just close with one other investment that, if you like, is a more classic BRI project. That was a road infrastructure project that we financed in Tajikistan. It was a sovereign project, so it had these public procurement rules and processes that I mentioned. In that bid, interestingly, the shortlist was entirely made up of Chinese companies, and so of course we remember the Chinese company which is now implementing the project. And we co-financed that project initially with the Asian Development Bank, and then in the second phase with this new institution, the Asian Infrastructure Investment. So I will stop there in terms of the description of the Ebrd, but I will also just say a very few brief words in case any of you may be interested in careers at the Ebrd. This gives you a snapshot of the functions that we have in banking at the heart, as you might expect, but also economics, policy, risk management, law, and so on. We have a program for international young professionals that's launching now. So there are opportunities to apply for that. It's a 24-month program with rotation for a number of departments, including 6 months in a field office. So if anybody is interested, I'd be happy to connect you to our colleagues at the bank. And we also have from time to time ad hoc internship opportunities that arise each year with the children to discuss as well. So that's the end of the warm-up act. I will now pass to my colleague Alex, who will give you an analytical presentation of our flagship transition.
Good morning, everyone. Great pleasure to be here and to be back in Hong Kong to present our economic report. It's a fairly large report available online, and we cover quite a bit of ground looking at the future of work, more or less. At who will be working, what's the demographics, what are they doing and how in terms of technology and automation, and where they work, where they come from, and where they go to. And just to look at very long-term trends in terms of how work and economic development within has changed, we plotted here a few characteristics of Russia And for example, back in 1917, life expectancy in Russia was something around 31, and male life expectancy was 20-something. And people think that it's an atrocious number and contributed quite a bit to the Russian Revolution, which is probably true, but if you look at the United States in 1920, life expectancy was 40. If you run economies with life expectancy of 40, they work quite different. There is little demand for education, and there is certainly little demand for pensions and social security. People go to a factory and work until they drop, quite literally. There are some people who will live until 100 and past, but it's not really a concern of policymaker on average. And over time, that has been rapidly changing, and with different demographics came different education and different technology, and it has all been evolving fairly fast. And recently, demographic change has been occurring fast. In a number of countries where we work, Egypt, Turkey, etc., the demographic pyramid looks in a standard way. There are more young people and fewer old people, but in much of our region, it's no longer a pyramid, and the population is aging very fast. In the mainland, actually there are more workers still and fewer old people, but if you look at the first 5 cohorts until the age of 25 or so of people in mainland China, they look a lot like emerging Europe, and so half a generation later you will have a very similar profile. Hong Kong looks a lot like our region, and there are still a bit more working age older population, however very few young people indeed. And so this is probably where demographic change is particularly fast. Our countries are basically the difference with Hong Kong and Korea in Asia is that our region is getting there at fairly low levels of per capita income. Bulgaria was the first developing country to get to a fairly old population structure in around 2000 at per capita income of the US of 20%. Ukraine will soon get there at 15%. And ultimately, the only sustainable solution to this, as we've discussed in our report, is to work longer. And if you live until 90, you probably work at least until 70, and so your careers become 50 years instead of 20 years. And this is actually not a straightforward proposition at all, because you have to somehow update and retain your skills. And so to look at it, we looked at Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development PIA surveys. They're quite similar to more famous PISA surveys, of which you may have heard, where in every country they would survey 15, 16-year-old students. Here, everyone from the age of 16 to 65 was subjected to standard surveys of numeracy, analytical reading, and problem solving using laptops. And one striking result that comes out of it is that after the age of 32, these cognitive analytical skills are declining very fast. So those of you who are still below the age of 32, take advantage of your learning space, and it may be shorter than you think. For me, of course, being quite a few years past that point now, you acutely feel that mental decline. It's a muscle. You try to exercise it, you try to slow it down. It's probably impossible to stop it, but you can work hard to slow it down, and to work for 50 years with rapid technological change, you probably have to. We looked at the survey a bit, what you can do. Using skills at work is very valuable in terms of the profile of skill retention, and employer-based training works well. Of course, we in this cross-section cannot really take account of the selection. In fact, it's quite possible that people who get to use their skills at work are also the ones who are better at using skills. So that we cannot really clean up. But I think that by and large, these results hold. Degrees, better education helps a lot to retain skills. PhD degrees add a little bit on top of university degree in terms of skill retention. But actually our department, heavily staffed with PhDs, was quite scandalized to see how little PhD adds on top of university degree. We had interesting discussions where we can and should publish it. And I told them, look guys, it's okay, your PhD is from MIT, from Cambridge, from Hong Kong, that's fine. That's an average PhD degree, and so we published it. But you can have your own opinion about what works and what doesn't. the other thing is that, however, although your skills, analytical skills decline fast after 32, the wage premium associated with those skills actually is rising with age, and is rising fast. And this result is economically and statistically significant. There are various interpretations of it. I think the most likely is that there are imperfect measures of other skills that are very hard to measure, soft skills, management skills, presentation skills, etc., that you pick up in life as you go along through lifelong learning. And this is a good thing, I think, but it's also a very problematic thing for the fabric of the society, because there are a lot of occupations out there, construction, catering, and so on, without good life learning opportunities. And so if the life working span is 50 years and more, the inequality will still be rising fast with this divide between jobs with lifelong learning and jobs without lifelong learning. And if and when you go to the government, you will actually face the challenge of addressing it. Related to that is the fact that the middle of the job distribution, the medium skilled jobs with medium pay, have been disappearing fast. And some high-skilled jobs and a lot of low-skilled jobs are being created. That's well documented in advanced economies, and we crunched similar numbers for countries where we operate. We also looked at countries like Argentina, Brazil, Malaysia, South Africa here, Thailand, and the picture is similar. Actually, the extent of job polarization into top and bottom, with little in the middle, is as fast in developing countries in emerging markets as it is in advanced economies. We don't have good data for China here. However, the speed of automation in China, in production of robots, software, etc., has been faster than anywhere else. And so we think that the same job polarization is happening here and in the mainland as well. And I will skip a few of these results, not directly related to learning, but I wanted to talk a little bit about migration and perhaps Belt and Road Initiative in this report. So migration has two sides to it. There is a lot of migration in London. Pretty much every cleaner we have employed personally came from Romania, but none of them came from Bucharest. They typically come from a smaller town or from countryside. They move to London. There are two sides to it. Migration from poorer countries to richer countries, and we have a chapter on that. And migration from areas that become less populated to areas that become more populated. And here we have a very detailed map, kind of Game of Thrones map, with these population changes on a 1 by 1 kilometer grid. I find three-dimensional maps quite difficult to digest after the age of 32. So I have this flat map that shows the same changes. And the orange bits are where in recent years populations dropped by more than 25%, and dark blue ones are where population grew by more than 50%. And you would see that there is a lot of population growth around London, north of France, Switzerland, Austria, north of Italy, a bit in Turkey. And if you think these are also places where populism has been rising fastest, it may not be a coincidence. It's very hard to manage these population changes. But these super densely populated cities, and this is certainly one of them, are also economically the most efficient ones. If you take a city and then look at a similar city, but twice more densely populated, you will find that this one will be 5 to 12% higher productivity, and productivity is growing faster. In part that's because it's easier to reach out to people, but in terms of customers, but I think most importantly, it's easier to reach out to a potential pool of applicants for a business. It's easier to hire in Hong Kong than in Beijing, and Beijing than in Harbin, and Harbin than in Bohol, and so on. And this is very important, but cities also become very congested and very polluted, and people move out. We have these detailed maps, and pretty much anything can be found in our region. Here we have insets of two cities, Moscow on the right and Moscow in the center. And in Moscow, people still have been piling up the middle of town. piling into the middle. In Warsaw, it's the opposite. The core of Warsaw is becoming depopulated very fast. People move out into suburbia and commute from there because infrastructure is more conducive to commuting and not very conducive to living in the center. You have all these patterns, and I think they're very important to take into account. And this is exactly what we did in our exercise, where we tried to model the effect of Belt and Road Initiative. And this is something I will finish with because I've been to a lot of presentations on the other side, and that's why I try to keep it short. You have basically here various corridors of ambitious plan of Belt and Road Initiative, rail, road, sea, and so on. We're trying to map them out and estimate the input of this infrastructure, taking account of the fact that people will use this infrastructure to trade, but also people will come and leave where the infrastructure is and will leave other areas behind. Now you can have, as long there is a lot of road construction still here in Hong Kong, but it wouldn't necessarily make the place less congested. You can also build 7, 10, 11 ring roads around Beijing. It doesn't really make the place less congested because people will come and use this infrastructure where they previously haven't. And so we're trying to account for this fact and put a number on the Belt and Road Initiative in terms of gains in per capita income and also in terms of gains in well-being that takes account of congestion and pollution. And what we find roughly is that gain is equivalent to what could be achieved by reducing only trade costs between everywhere and everywhere on this giant continent by 2 percentage points. And we found it's a very useful number to anchor this discussion. We've had a lot of interesting discussions. Some people think 2 percentage points in trade costs is a tiny number. Some people think it's a huge number. I will leave it entirely to you to judge whether it's a tiny or huge number. If you look at tariffs, it's a very large number because in places like European Union, you cut an average tariff by 2 percentage points, it will just go to 0. If you look at non-tariff costs, and all-in trade costs are tariffs and non-tariffs and logistics and infrastructure and all of this, theoretically it should be very easy to lower them because they remain very high. Empirically, it has been actually very, very difficult. So from that perspective, 2 percentage points, maybe not a negligible number at all. So with that, I will stop here, and I very much welcome the questions. There are a lot more material in the report. You can have a look at how we estimate the input of education reforms. If you are interested in education in Estonia, we have an interesting experiment. There are a lot of studies that we did, and you can have a look. It's all online. I very much welcome questions on the report, on the way we work at Ebrd, on economic developments in our region. And I must warn you that I've done my fair share of teaching at Cambridge, and if you don't have questions, I will ask you questions. I still remember how to do it. Thank you. Any questions? That's not the wrong Okay, yeah. Okay, sorry, I probably messed up with it. No, it's okay. Okay, we have a question.
Yeah, maybe just a very general question because at least for me, I come from the information systems discipline. So I'm just wondering how could universities such as the City University of Hong Kong and play a role or participate in this these efforts or this like the Ebrd or all the efforts along here. What kinds of fit do you see that or skill sets or whatever that we should try to develop in order to be able to contribute towards this all these initiatives and so on?
It's a very good question. I think, well, first and foremost, universities, I think, need to do what they do best, teach people, and certainly that is very important. I think that there are some skills that come and go, and there are universal basic skills, and anything in between. There was an interesting study by Deloitte saying that these days, it's virtually impossible to say what is an average life of a skill, because some skills you use for a very long time, some skills you leave behind very quickly. And certainly from my education, some of the software I started working in no one uses anymore, but on the other hand, whatever things I've done in Excel, I still have to edit these charts a bit for the presentation if analysts cannot edit them quite. So some of them actually live on. And they reckon that the kind of the half decay period as in nuclear physics of a skill is 5 years. So the average skill has kind of becomes half irrelevant after 5 years. And certainly it's harder to train people in this environment. And what we find, for example, for our region, is that although numeracy and analytical reading and all these fundamental skills are quite good, and this is what you see on this chart, that our economies in post-communist economies are as good as advanced economies in terms of skill decay curve, minus Japan. But the ICT skills lag behind. And basically you see that everywhere in the region, including Estonia, they are weaker than in advanced economies by quite a margin, including Korea here on the right. So I think that keeping up to date with technology and teaching people something more at the technological frontier all the time is what universities are there to do. And it's not very easy always, because people teaching at universities also have 50-year careers, right? So it is a challenge, but I think it can be done. The other thing that we try to do as an institution is that comes from this chart, that a lot of this, the fact that universities can train people better definitely helps with skill retention. There are fundamental skills like Googling. Actually, when I've been working with very many interns that come, the biggest difference in interns' ability, you ask them to Google something, what they bring you back by the end of the day. And it doesn't depend on what they studied so much, etc. Actually, the best interns working on this report with me over the years, where one was an astrophysicist, the other was a chemical engineer from MIT. You really don't have to be economist to do economics, but you have to learn very fast. You get an economic question, you Google it, you have an opinion by the end of the day. That's the kind of fundamental research skill these days. So you have these fundamental skills, and universities can do a lot to build them, but you also have employer-based training that actually works very well. Now, the trick with employer-based training, and we actually work with companies like Volkswagen, etc., on our projects. But the trick is also in the modern world, where people stay with an employer for fewer years than they used to be, etc., to somehow certify them and to make them more easily transferable between employers. And I think here, entering in partnerships with vocational training institutions and universities, so that you can have this private sector university partnership, and private sector can figure out what to train, and the university can figure out how to certify it and make it transferable across companies, and kind of build a curriculum around it. I think that works well, and we are trying to do it in various countries, in Serbia, in other countries. Poland, exactly these programs, where it will be the private sector, the university or the vocational training institution, ourselves. I think this is also increasingly important, just because if you, in the past, if you train people to work for 20 years, you can probably more or less teach them what they need for 20 years. For 50 years, and with the modern technology, it's probably not really possible. So you have to engage more in this life learning as well, not only teaching bright 18-year-olds.
Just a follow-up. Moving on to the point just now that you are also looking for people, graduates working in careers in EBRD and so on. So because traditionally, like say, at least at the individual siloed disciplinary areas like accounting or finance and so on, we traditionally like train people for like to work in banks like Bank of China, HSBC and so on. But I think EBRD will be quite different. So is there any like beyond the traditional skills, the knowledge and skills relating to like finance and so on? Like say to work in an EBRD, what kinds of like you mentioned maybe soft skills or whatever, things like that, or management skills, or being able to work in different cultures and things like that. Is there that kinds of the skills that you feel that you're especially pertinent to working in EBRD?
It's a very good question. I think that everything that you mentioned is very important. And when we recruit at EBRD, we tend to do it individually as line managers, and there is actually little centralized processing by HR. So there is no generic profile that we would look for. I will go through my pile, Richard will go through his pile, etc. In the modern world, the cost of application is relatively low. You would format your CV and you will send it to 70 people or 100 people, and we certainly receive a lot of cover letters, how people dream to work for the World Bank, etc. So this copying and pasting is very obvious. I actually don't mind so much. If somebody wants to work for the World Bank, they may want to work for us too. But because the cost of application is low, we also receive a lot of applications, right? So for an internship, for a junior position, I don't know, 500 plus is probably a pile that is quite common. This year was a lot less, but it's still 300 something. So you go through a lot. So I try to figure out how many seconds, minutes, hours I spent per CV in the first pass, because I all look at them. Any guesses in the audience? What's the average number on the first pass per CV? Net time, excluding the time it takes to open and close it in the online system. Any guesses? How many?
30 seconds.
30 seconds, okay, good guess. Any lower guesses?
Lower, 5 seconds.
5 seconds, very good. Any lower guesses? No, 1 second is technology of the future. I can't do it. 3 seconds for me. So you look at it for 3 seconds, and then out of this pile, I think maybe 30 plus CVs, you will look again for many more seconds than 3 seconds. I think in the second pass, maybe for up to 30 seconds, you will look at it before it moves to even shorter pile and you reach out to people. It's not everyone does that, but a lot of, if you actually believe that a manager will look at all the hundreds of CVs, you can think how many hours they can spend on it. Actually, 3 seconds times 500, and it takes, open, close, it's close to 8 seconds gross time, because you have to click through the system. 3 net is 8 gross. Our IT is not perfect. So, multiply, 7 per minute, if you have 700, you spend still 2 hours of net time just going through the pile. And then, so think about it. So next time, have a look at your CV and see what you can see in 3 seconds on your own CV, just to get to the next stage. It's a very good test. If you can't see anything about yourself in 3 seconds, I wouldn't be able either. Now, but that's if you apply to EBRD. We are very much stuck behind the curve. We believe in this very personalized process, because I have to actually, this person will write this report. I will come to Hong Kong and eat my goose and present it and enjoy myself. They have to write it. So it's actually a very important person, right? You have to find the right one. And I don't think I know how to automate it. But take Deloitte. It's a huge machinery. So we were together with a principal from Deloitte in Bled Economic Forum earlier, and I asked them how they do recruitment, and they actually they do more than 25%. So actually they recruit 16,000 to 20,000 people a year for their North America, Canada operations.
So there, only shortlisted candidates, actually the last interview stage, which is 1:3, 1:4 ratio, get looked at by a human. All the previous stages are done by a software. Now the software will read your CVs differently. It will probably look for some keywords, etc. And so I get a lot of CVs now optimized for that, written in font 4 or font 8 with a lot of jargon packed into them. The problem is that, of course, I in 3 seconds will not see anything on that CV. So if you really don't know and you are interested both in Ebrd and Deloitte, you actually, in this modern world, have to construct your CV on which a human will see who you are in 3 seconds, and the machine will put everything into Excel boxes that you went to Hong Kong and you got your grades and you are motivated and thinking out of the box or never thinking out of the box, whatever is right for Deloitte. I will not sort of make any assumptions for them. Yes, so that's, but I assume that you then came to a next stage. A lot of people would look for a smart person, and there is no way of judging it. I am certainly very relaxed on backgrounds of people, and one of the best analysts I worked for a while was we usually hire masters or PhD economics students from top universities, but no offense to Edinburgh, where my brother also works, but he was from Edinburgh, so not really from Oxbridge, but very respectable. He was a mathematician, no economics background whatsoever, and he was undergrad. So he didn't do masters, he just wanted to work at Ebrd. But he sent a CV that is readable in 3 seconds, and we had a fascinating discussion and we hired him, and he was totally brilliant, sort of learning economics by the end of the day. So it doesn't probably matter so much what you studied in many cases, but if I ask you what you did for your project and ask to summarize it in 1 minute, be able to summarize it in 1 minute in an interesting way. Be able to explain your business studies to an economist, to a banker, to a lawyer, if you want to do something different in a way that they will be able to understand. And I think even within your own profession, don't assume that people are familiar with the jargon that you study. Because actually, most people, when they don't understand the jargon that you impose on them, they feel tremendously stupid. And they have this, if the hiring manager is past the age of 32, they have this inferiority complex that they're getting stupider by the year. And you really play the wrong way. So try to explain what you do in simple terms that would be easy to understand, and show some intellectual curiosity. I think that ultimately a person who is there to come to Ebrd and do something quickly like this, to research a topic on the future of work, it's impossible to find a person who did a PhD on the future of work for their degree and will come and maybe it's possible, but we never managed. You have to find someone who will quickly do it. So they have to have that intellectual curiosity, and it's harder said than done, but try to demonstrate it. And I think that it's very important for any job you will be trying to do. And that's about it. And certainly in a lot of them, if you I asked this question Martin Wolf in FT, what he looks for in his interns. And he said that he doesn't look for any knowledge of economics, and he only looks for someone who will be able to write something up quickly and in exactly the way FT writes it. And if you go for economists, etc. So it's also ultimately a skill, but all backgrounds are welcome. So it's a very long question, very long answer to that question, but you will all be in the process of sending out your CVs. So if you find any of it remotely useful, I will be very happy. Yes, please.
I wanted to ask, ERPD will obviously invest in thousands of different areas and different ventures. Ventures that may not necessarily guarantee a profit, or they may be somewhat risky. I wanted to ask, how does ERPD manage to balance investing in innovative youth ideas while still focusing on its core competencies?
Very good question. Do you want to?
So that is in fact an excellent question. As I said, we take a very, I would say, rigorous and rather conservative approach to risk. So for all of our investments, and there are about 400 every year, we look very carefully at the clients. Is it somebody that we can work with? Is it somebody that has a track record that is trustworthy? We look at the project, what is the business plan? Is the market for that activity developed, or is there a good economic case for the piece of infrastructure that is being implemented? What about the environment in the market, the political economy and the business environment risks? So we take all of these things into account very carefully, and of course that can be a brake on supporting innovation. And it's something that I think multilateral development banks in general, and including the Ebrd, it's a tension that we have to work with. So we do have a knowledge economy program or strategy. We provide advisory services. We try to work with local partnership institutions. But we're not very good in this type of institution working with tech startups. But we might try to help the environment for these types of investment. Alex, do you want to say anything more on that?
Well, not very much. We have this VCAP program, Venture Capital Investment Partnerships, where we try to do exactly that. But it's a bit hard going because of our internal risk management procedures. Ultimately, there's stuff with people that worked in a bank for a long time. It's a bit hard to change mentality. But on the side, we're trying to do exactly that. Innovation in a bureaucracy of 2,000-something people doesn't always work very fast, but we'll get there.
Your major exposure to Central Asia, Malaysia, Baltic, and Balkans is in general where more preferring countries are going to dedicate your focus. And the follow-up question is that you have a number of sell downs to have China and CBC and vendors. Do you collateral flow and sell downs, etc., or they are natural?
Well, I think the co-investment question Richard will take as to our risk-return profile. I think that traditionally we've managed it well. It's our mandate to take higher risks, and we do that. But actually the risk-return, high-risk, high-return environment has been historically fairly good for us because we price it off the market, although we can offer much longer tenors or local currency instead of foreign currency if need be. And then being an international organization working with the government, we can mitigate some of the political risk, some of the regulatory risk, some of the currency conversion risk. So because we can mitigate a bit of that high risk and still price the margin of the market, actually over the long term it has been a good proposition for us. But of course we have suffered substantial losses around the Russian crisis of '98 and so on, and we've been through that.
And maybe just to complement that, we have many ways of managing risk. So we do some sovereign lending, and in this case we're taking sovereign risk, and we're very careful to do that in a sustainable way, and we work with other international institutions, including the IMF. For some of the corporate financing that we do in these challenging countries, we take we do corporate finance, so we might take a guarantee from a parent outside the country, which is more robust. And then when we take project risk, or we take the risk of localized enterprises, we are very careful. So we look very carefully at the sustainability of that investment, financially and commercially, and we take different types of security to make sure that our interests are covered. So on the question about the B lending with the sell down. So we have a product which is unique to international financial institutions, which is our AB structure. And what it means is that, and it's typically for larger investments, the EBRD will be the lender of record. And then, so we do all the project structuring and the negotiations with the client, and we sign the deal as the lender of record, and then we sell down that deal with the same terms but for a fee to a commercial bank, which benefits from the EBRD's status as lender of record. And its privileges as an international organization, which include tax benefits. So it's quite an attractive product. Well, it's an attractive product for us because we want to, as part of our mandate, bring in commercial lending to these markets, and we also want to limit our exposure in some cases. And it's an attractive product for the market because they get this ready cooked package with the benefits that it has for them.
Seeing as there's no more questions, I would like to thank Dr. Plekanov and Mr. Jones for their presentation today. I think it was profoundly insightful, not just for myself, but for everyone here. I think everyone thoroughly enjoyed your presentation and your new knowledge, and have some new things to think about when they consider the business world and growth in the future economic development, as well as new job interests. And on behalf of City University, we'd like to thank you for your presentation.
If you think it's helpful to hold here, I programmed our file to randomly find one. So this file the square restaurant, right? No. I think that Exchange Square 2 is in Central. As in one of these, as in one of these shopping malls.
Okay.
So it's both floor.
The IFC is very close to there. If you want to eat in Central, you can.
Well, we
Close to
have
Exchange
a
Square.
Do you want to take Matrix or Metro?
Yes, so you can take Metro to the central first and have that.
yeah, it's, I mean, that's up to you. I think that it's...
The traffic looks much nicer, doesn't it?
No, it's... Yeah. But,
So you want a cab or you
probably.
Oh, yes, that would be great. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your presentation. That was really fun.
Yeah, good. It's enjoyable.
Do you mind if I perhaps write up some of those job tips that you gave us for the CV?
Absolutely. I think that I'm not entirely sure that I have the hiring numbers of Deloitte or anything like that right. So if you kind of round it up to a major, Big Four company and tens of thousands of people, that kind of, because I don't want them to be upset with me misquoting them.
Yeah, but it was actually very useful information for our students, I'm sure.
I hope so, but for publication purposes, if it can be a little bit
sanitized sort of like performance. And, but the memory, I think, is one of these declining curves, and it happens.
Yeah,
very
yeah,
fast.
yeah, yeah. It's too true. Too true. Yeah. Thank you. Great presentation. I'll be in touch if I may anyway, Richard, and I can send you the
Yes,
copies
sure.
anyway, right?
Yeah.
And please welcome for your contributions.
Okay.
Etc. or whatever. And if you do have an AIIB contact for the
Yes.
future, anybody who's coming down here, ideally or otherwise, Beijing otherwise.
What sort of person would you like?
Someone who's involved in. See, I did a search on the AIIB website for Belt and Road.
No, you won't find it.
Amazing. So that was very interesting.
Yes.
So what's going on there?
The AIB has nothing to do with the Belt and Road Initiative. It's a multilateral organisation, policy set by its 100 plus shareholders. And, you may see that India is the largest recipient, not classically supported the Belt and Road.
Okay.
However,
Okay. Well, that was very interesting. So I mean, I would be interested in talking to somebody who, well, we're interested in Boston Road, like to get a perspective. How does if the AIIB doesn't replace the Boston Road traditionally, not quite sure what it would be. Because it is still active.
it's associated with the Belt and Road.
It's associated with
Overlaps with the Belt and Road.
Yeah.
But it struggles a little bit with our positions.
Right, that's very interesting. So somebody who can speak to that interface, yeah, I don't know who that might be.
It'll probably have to be somebody quite senior.
Yes.
But we're going to show you to the taxi station.
Sure.
And we will have a lot of taxi there.
Yeah.
Just that taxi can
You
come
mean
over here.
shopping mall?
Yes, shopping
Yeah,
mall.
okay.
Okay? It's just 5 minutes from here. Okay? Thank you so much for coming
Thank you,
over.
thanks
Look
for
forward
having
to
us.
seeing
Very
you
nice to
again.
meet you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, great to meet you.
Great to meet you too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
That's why we also have that's why we have development things like ours, like a higher taxes scheme. Certainly, if you look, we don't calculate or report things like Basel capital ratios, but if we did, it would be 20-something%, much higher than any commercial bank. So we are kind of set up in here to take. Longer. On average, longer, I think we will go up to 18 years and, for infrastructure. Not as long as Asian Development Bank, that will probably go up to 40, but we will do long. We're basically more or less trying to match it to the
this kind of
life cycle of the asset, with the payback period and things like that. It's kind of hard to tell, can you, is there something that jumps out from it that you're looking at and you were a lot of them you see nothing.
But I was working for the compliance department.
Um,
And I'm like, background.
Absolutely. Certainly, it's all done in the development department. It goes to Ebrd jobs and sign up for job alert by department. And then it is
opening，小心开门，关门，door landing，关门，
I saw like the program information is closed already.
Who is this?
Yeah, for the 2020, it's like February 22nd.
HR was not kind enough to
Thanks, guys. Yeah. Bye-bye.
But it may still be possible to
It's priceless.
I need to take a look on my CV and see I can find anything.
I've only 2 seconds now.